very, like I lost the word that I was even looking for right now. It'd be great for a panel.
Were you going to say something?
Convincing. I'd say you're very, very convincing. That's what I was going to say.
I appreciate that. That fits very well in my role in life. So specifically, let's see here. I'm going to make sure I'm recording. I am recording. Cool. Okay. So I'll first do an introduction to everybody on the panel, and then I'll go through some of the key topics that we're going to cover. And around these, I will also add a few, I will expand on a few of these questions that are prepared here. But I want to do a little overview first. So we'll have Christina go, then Jen, then Christine. So give a little introduction, a little bit about yourself, and we'll set it as a minute because otherwise I would be the one to go 5 minutes. So a minute, tell us about yourself. So we'll have Christina, you go first.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Christina McBerry. I am a principal in Sarah Pyle Academy in Wilmington, Delaware. I've been an administrator for about 17 years and in education for just about 22. I am a co-mom of 10 kids, which pretty much means I have a school at home as well. And it's a blended family, adopted kids, biological kids, kind of she's and ours, and a whole bunch of other things in there. We also have 2 dogs, a golden shepherd and a golden doodle, which make our lives very happy. We are fierce advocates for mental health education in schools. We also have our own business, Educate for Hope, LLC, which has a passion for leadership development around happiness agency, as well as mental health trainings in schools, specifically around mental health first aid. And I'm very excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Jen, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jen Molitor. I've been in education for about 20 years, and this is my first year as a principal of an intermediate school. It's an awesome year to start being a principal, but I've loved every second. Let's see. I have 4th and 5th graders in my building, and I guess I've been in kind of the elementary world my whole career. And let's see, at home, I have a husband and 2 kids, and 2 horses, and 2 dogs, and some fish, and 3 cats, and a couple chickens. So we kind of live out in the farm in a rural area just north of Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm a recent author of the Happy Teacher's Handbook. And it's been my mission to help teachers kind of reclaim that passion of why they started teaching in the first place so that they can really love their jobs again and not give in to the overwhelm. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And Christine, last but not least.
My name is Christine Pepe. I'm a school principal of St. Micah's School in Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada. I'm a new principal as well, Jen. So this is my first year as a principal in the school for students from kindergarten to grade 6. I'm a mother of 3 boys, happily married. We enjoy outdoor activities, spending time outside and together. And even though we've been together for the last year during the pandemic, we're still not sick of each other. So that's great. I'm very passionate about building relationships in the building, teaching the whole child, but most importantly, working as a team, being there for one another, listening to one another, and just making sure that everybody has a voice in the building. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So I will just give first of all, my bio is not nearly as impressive as y'all's. So I very much appreciate y'all's dedication to service. I'm Stephen Georgella. I'm the founder and CEO of Fountain Forward, which is an agency, growth agency for small business out of Houston, Texas, and the founder of Same Here CEO. So very glad to be involved with Evan Schwartz of Beluga in Same Here CEO. And I'm here today to moderate for these 3 wonderful people talking about happiness and talking about happiness reflections. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a few questions, and I'll also be elaborating on those questions. And so first of all, we can set it up for each of us to go, or we can just kind of have this thing conversational. I would prefer to have it as conversational. And so everybody here, if you can, just flow and don't worry about interrupting, just kind of go. And y'all are all highly educated, so you can easily just know when to speak and when not to. I will definitely not be the one to jump on top of everyone's conversation. And so a couple of the topics, describing happiness in your own life. Why is it so important to all the other aspects in your life? First, you being personally happy. And then in your busy life, we often lose track of the importance of slowing down and reflecting. And so, what have you done individually to take time to reflect, in which creates happiness, and reflect on your happiness and joy. And then I want to talk about how that impacts people around you. I have a totally different perspective from my world, and I think that as I guess I can call the word educators. Is that an okay choice of words? Okay, as
Yeah.
educators, your impact is is integral to the development of your students and faculty, et cetera. And so how has that impacted others around you? And then how can this mentally be shared? How can this mentality be shared throughout the education industry? And so first of all, if anybody wants to talk about happiness in your own life, how you're defining it and how you describe it, how you're then taking time to how you're taking time to reflect upon it, how it impacts people around you, and how can you share this mentality? So who wants to go first?
Well, I can start, I think. Or Jen, if you want to go ahead.
I was
No,
pointing.
Christine,
Get ready
great.
to
Go
rock, paper,
first.
scissors.
I think your question is very loaded there, Stephen, and very long. And I think most people, try to find a big, complicated definition to happiness. But to me, really, I think it's focusing on the little things. I think when we try to find something too big, we get easily overwhelmed, whether it's in our job or at home, in our lives. Focusing and knowing to recognize the little things, I think makes it much more manageable, much more or easier to celebrate. I think it's easier to be grounded then, rather than focusing on having a successful career, making lots of money, and having everybody that we want around us. If we stop and realize all the little things that we have, I find our list gets longer way faster. So I would say that, to me, that's where I would start.
Awesome. So it sounds like really talking about you personally and how you're setting the example, your own lived experiences. And so my question back to that is as things become busier and busier, I definitely have the issue with I'm diagnosed bipolar too, and so my personality wants to I have FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So I'm always going to the next level. You have a lot of people around you that look up to you when things become extremely busy, especially with what's going on in the world right now. It's so much unknown, so much existential pressure, and I definitely don't have anywhere near the understanding that y'all do with regards to what's going on in education. But in talking to Evan, it's essentially just like, well, we're gonna guess at what's coming next, and we'll let you know if it was a good idea or not, is kind of the narrative that I got from him. So with all this going on, how are you able to reflect on happiness? What does that process look like?
I think it's to go back to who you like, what makes you and what holds you down. It's grounding. Really, it's what either brought you into the job. Like, why did I decide to move forward as a principal? Why did I decide to become a teacher to start with? Why did I decide to become a mother? It's those little things that brought me here. And to me, it always goes back to the core values that I have. And the picture I have is really, it's a little rock in which in an activity before and at another workshop I was at, we had to find a word that meant a lot to us. And like, to me, core was my word. It's when you exercise, you want your core to be strong, because then you can develop all the other muscles in your body. Your core values is what's going to make sure that you do something that you love and that sits well with you when you go back home to your family at night. You want to teach your core values to your kids. So to me, when things get out there and I can work myself up to be climbing up the walls and up the curtains in the window, it's really to think back at what brought me here and to just focus on that core and really focus on that. So sometimes it means just cuddling my family and just sitting close together. It's going back to when the work is overwhelming. It's to look at who's really at the basis of everything we do, which are the children, and just then to go sit in a class, let yourself be immersed by the laughter, the little things. It's just to be to just go back to that first thing that brought you to be here. And sometimes we have to ignore everything else, all the fluff around. The fluff is nice. I appreciate the fluff around me, but really it's just to remember why we're here and why we're doing this. So it's and yes, sometimes we'll have to isolate ourselves or to find times for ourselves to to just go back to that. Sometimes it's to throw ourselves into the midst of things, but to me, I think it's just to go back to what brought me, why am I here, and then to focus on that. And that's how I catch my breath, and then find one more to keep going.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me, there's a book by Kevin McCarthy called The On Purpose Person. And in The On Purpose Person, you essentially come out to a 2-word purpose. And I think that going back to your core is such a great choice of words, because that purpose, like mine's liberating greatness. And so when I start to get down on myself, I think about the people around me that I think can level up and have asked me to help them level up in their life, especially when they're not seeing a bigger vision for themselves. And you going back to your core is definitely that foundation. So that's great. Appreciate you sharing. Christina or Jen, whoever wants to go next, happiness in your own life, and how you make sure that when things get busy, that you're able to not become overwhelmed, or when you become overwhelmed, how you're able to get back to center. I'm just going to call it Christina. Let's go.
Well, I think for me, it's really interesting because if anybody were to describe me as a child and as an adult, it would be happy and easygoing and a pleaser. And it was very pivotal for me when happiness and happiness agency became so relevant as an educator and as a mom. And I remember it was a life-changing experience, and I needed to take a step back and realize I wasn't doing right by me. And I remember going to a therapist and, saying, I'm being so selfish. I'm thinking about this and that. And the therapist's words still ring true in my head all the time. And he was like, how can you ever expect your kids to value their happiness if you're not modeling your own happiness or putting your happiness first? And I took 2 things away from that. One, my happiness is important, and I needed to do that, not just for me, for my kids. And it was a manipulative strategy from my therapist, because he knew I was always going to do right by my kids. And at that time, I only had 3. And the second was modeling and how important it is.
Only 3. Sorry for interrupting. Only 3. I just wanted I heard that and I was like, well, I was thinking about capping it too. So only 3.
Well, Stephen, when you have 10, there's 2. So when we only have 6 in the house right now, and I'm only going to have 3 again in August, and I'm not sure how we're going to move forward. We're like starting to sweat out. We have 1 going away from living at home, and then 2 going to college. So we're starting.
Congratulations. Sorry for interrupting you. I especially said this is more conversation based. I was like, pause. Only 3.
Yeah. I'm the queen of interruption, so I'm ready for it.
For sure.
But at that time, when I thought about it, I'm like, I have this really huge responsibility, and from that, not that I didn't realize it before, but came from that our whole belief in School Happiness Agency. Our responsibility to create these opportunities and these actions and these environments where kids can experience joy and realize joy and know what makes them happy. And as a leader and as a parent, which really are the same things, making sure that we are maximizing that in a way that students and kids in general know what it means. You mentioned an author, Nell Nodding. My gosh, I love that woman. I've yet to meet her, and I need to do that. She has written a lot about happiness and care, and she wrote that happy people are rarely cruel, mean, or violent. And it's such a simple statement, but I carry that with me also when I think about, our kids, and as they move forward, I'm very high performing. My kids are very high performing, but if they don't know how to recognize happiness, and a big part of that comes back to your question about reflection, like it needs to be intentional. I used to think, oh man, I am a very overly reflective person. I'm my biggest critic as well. But in that, I have to model for my students, like it's not enough just to reflect in the car ride home. I need to set up intentional time, and I need to reflect on the positive things and retrain my mind and look for what's going well. Our students, they reflect on their goals every 2 weeks, and right away they want to say what they didn't do right or why they didn't do it. But it's retraining them to say, what were you leveraging that worked? And, what strengths? How did you lean into your values? And really starting to build that capacity so that when they leave us from high school, they're ready to lean into their happiness. And, we have 10 kids, and we all know the mental health statistics, and that's very real. And our support for our family is always, bringing it back to laughter, and it's not always happy, and it's okay. And it's okay to say, look, this is not going good. And we've had some really, really, really hard times. But at the end of the day, I know that we can come back to what does make them happy.
That's great feedback. I think what's interesting there is I have a tremendous amount of empathy for, I want to, I'm totally different scenario than y'all. But in a world in which is becoming more and more segmented, in my opinion, there's a lower level of existential terror compared to 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when it's at any one point a disease, a war, whatever it is, it's much lower. We end up creating these segments, and I think something that can kind of break those segments down is, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the amount of pressure that y'all have in the education system as you're trying to shape young people's lives. But it's really more than that, because they then get to take their opinions home to their parents and their friends. And even if you've done it the right way, mostly, not to saying that there aren't supportive people, but the majority of the criticism is what comes back, going back to kind of what you talked about with your students every 2 weeks, focusing on the goals, bringing up how you've made progress. And I think what's interesting in a world that is continues to be, in my opinion, more and more segmented, I think about in the position that I'm in, the thing that you had said was taking care of yourself before you can take care of them. And that's something that over the last 12 months has flipped from liberating greatness, to me, always meant working extremely hard on all these people. And I did that all the way to, I'd been in the hospital multiple times because I wore myself out. And then about 12 months ago, in working with Eric from Same Here, and got people like Evan and Dr. Andrew Pleener, who's head of Same Here Psych, after a relapse and some drugs and all these problems, it was like, well, here's the deal. You keep focusing all your energy on these people, you probably want to take care of you, or this is just going to continue. And so I have some empathy for what you mentioned there, because I have employees, which essentially are my students, if you will. And I could feel all this manic energy working towards them, but in the back end, I'm miserable. And I'm miserable across the board. And so when you mentioned that, I sat there and I'm like, well, we're really not so different. And that's where I want to remove the whole segmentation. I would prefer for us to be more alike versus less alike. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the fact that, I'm dealing with them and it pretty much ends there. It's not that they don't have spouses or children, etc. But you're dealing with kids a lot of the time, and the parents then hear this feedback and it's filtered and whatever. And now you're dealing with 2 layers of responsibility. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for that, because again, it comes back to taking care of yourself first, and then helping others. But you're not just helping others, you're also helping others with these brains in which are soaking up all this information, but then also that information is being shared with then parents who are extremely critical of making sure that their children are getting the best. And so all these emotions were coming out inside me as you're saying that. And so again, it just raises my level of respect. And it also makes me feel, at first I feel like, okay, these 3 people in education, I'm like out over here, and it feels good to kind of connect. I personally could connect on some of the lived experience you were sharing there. So I just want to
Gave me goosebumps.
Yeah. Well, as you're kind of going through it, I'm like, this isn't so, I've been focusing on things not being so freaking different all the time. And we're just so much closer, and y'all are just, you're leaders of these communities, and especially of these people that are so moldable, and you're liberating greatness on a daily basis. And so, anywho, Jen, your time to share, and then we'll just have some more chats.
Gosh, yeah. So I feel like I pick up on little inklings from everybody, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally part of it too. So I think I've kind of honed in on 3 different aspects of creating happiness. For me, I guess, I started teaching about 20 years ago, and it was just this energetic, peppy, like super excited teacher to be there. And within 6 years, I was starting to get super burnt out and just into that overwhelm and demands. And it was just like, oh, and you forget why you're there. You forget why you're doing it. And all of a sudden you become this victim of things are happening to me. And, why does this happen? And then you just get stuck going the other way into burnout. And so it took me a few years, but I did a lot of super reflection and just self-help groups and that kind of thing. And just discovered that I really needed to go back to my core, I'll use your word. And so I started just implementing lots of different practices to help take care of me. And so the first one that I'll touch on is gratitude. And I use that with kids whenever we're anxious, tired, worried, um, mad, whenever we can turn it around to what we're grateful for, it can shift our perspective and turn us around. And so gratitude is part of my everyday practice every single day. And even at night, if my mind is spinning on something else, I'll just turn it to, okay, what am I grateful for today? And then within a minute, I'm sleeping because it just totally shifts me into this, oh my gosh, I've got so much to be grateful for. So gratitude is one huge thing. The other is presence. Presence is my one word for the year. That's kind of like yours is core, mine is presence. And I want to be present with my family, with the kids at school, parents. My big thing with being present at school is giving everyone eye contact. When a kid comes to my office, I want to like zone in and say, I'm yours right now. Tell me what you want to talk about. With parents too. And another part of helping me be present is connecting to the things that I love to do that fill me up. And this year I started riding horses again. I rode horses since I was 8, and I gave it up when I had kids because I couldn't teach full time and have kids and ride horses. And so I gave it up for a long time. And my daughter just turned 9 and she started riding horses, and I kind of got back into it. It lights me up. It's my thing again. And it's exercise, it's outdoors, it's animals, it's all those things that just, I go to the barn, I'm working with the horse, and everything else disappears, and I come back such a happier person. So whatever it is that can help you be more present, that hobby, that thing that lights you up, pursue that. And the biggest obstacle, people say, well, I don't have time for that. Like, when am I going to fit that in? You make time. That's what happens. You make time. If you put it on your schedule, it will happen. If you're like, oh, I'll get to that next week when I have time, you'll never have time. So that's how I made it work. I went from riding a horse one day a week to riding every day for a few weeks in a row. And I was like, wow, how did I do that? So that was my second thing. And then third is just the reflection part. Whenever I want to add something new to my routine, something I think is going to enhance me, make me a better person, I put it in my planner as something that I track. So I have these little things, like I pray every day, and I have a little Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just a little M. And for Monday, I go down my list. I'm like, did I pray today? Was I grateful today? Did I do my yoga today? And it's a super quick way to check on those things and to reflect, have I done that? One is mindfulness. Like, one of my goals was to be mindful for 2 minutes daily. And I have that on my little checklist. And once that becomes mastery, I don't need it on my checklist anymore because it just happens. So gratitude, presence, and reflection. That's how I think I would sum up all this happiness.
Awesome. Awesome. That's amazing advice there. I like that. Thank you for sharing. So I think what we'll do here is let's have a conversation on a couple of things that I want to highlight that, talking about, Christina, talking about chills, because we're going to talk here about how, y'all making these moves and focusing on, reflection and happiness, how it impacts others, and how you then want to share the advice to others. What I want to bring up here is, gratitude. First of all, what I liked most about gratitude is what I've associated with. This came back to like April of 20. It's like April, May of like 2020, and when you realize that you have so much potential, especially in a high, y'all are all doing, your vocation is being done at a very, being executed at a very high level. Some would say the highest. And when you're doing that and you're that type of personality, what most of the time gets forgotten, in my opinion, and I realize that the majority of my opinion here is going to be, through my lens, is humility, because you have this capability of going higher and higher and helping more and all these things. And I lost track of humility, which is like, hey, like, this isn't about like thinking about like this one little tip in which you had your maximum capability, and then every time you're not doing something at that level, to not have gratitude for it. Like, let's have some humility. I think about human. It's like, let's realize you're human, which is like this ebbs and flows. Talk about like the Same Here scale that we reference with Same Here Global. Like we all just slide the scale back and forth. We're all in the same continuum. 5 and 5 people experience stress and trauma. And so let's just realize we just slide the scale back and forth. So when you mentioned gratitude, I immediately think about humility. It's like, have some humility for yourself, have it for others. And so I really love that perspective, being like, well, every single day, character building days, which are the tougher days, there's still gratitude for having those, because then you have to allow yourself to feel those, and then allow yourself to also feel the joyous days. And if you, or the joyful days, and if you jam those bad days and try to, put a Band-Aid on them, then you take away from your joyful days, because you're not allowing your brain to feel. And so I think that was great advice. And then the presence thing, my gosh, you get stuck in the ego, to reference like Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now, you get stuck in the ego. And so like accelerated response therapy, something I'm working on right now, something I'm going through, to be able to take stress and trauma and allow myself to just like get past it. And you have to just work. So I think presence, that is so wonderful, especially in a world, as a marketer, I'm just trying to take more people's attention. I broker attention for a living. And with mobile phones and accessibility information being at an all-time high, it's like this presence thing, especially for children. Like I just heard that. I'm like, oh, I could just unpack that. Cause it's like, think about children. And again, I don't have children. I'm 32, married 2 years, coming up here soon. And like the children thing, how can I make my children be more present? I'm from Wisconsin. I grew up in the woods, and like I was present because I'm fishing. I'm doing all these things. So y'all have I would love to hear more about how you can keep these kids present. I'm sure that, well, tell me real quick, is that just like the biggest battle? I'm not saying like there's all these other, like, is that getting them to like associate and socialize and all? Somebody share something about that. It has to be a huge battle.
I think it's a battle, but I wouldn't say it's the hugest battle for sure. I mean, technology, like everything, everybody gets so afraid of technology, I think. And we worry and we want to put all of our issues and problems on that. And I saw this meme way back when I was first working with technology, and it was a digital principal. So I was like, oh, digital, but what really that was how you use it to help your school, do better and be better. But it was a meme of a caveman and fire. And caveman was like, oh, I'm really afraid of this fire, this new technology. And I think that as long as you're connected, like you had said, and if you're modeling it, kids don't do what we say, they do what we do. So they're going to be reading books if we're reading books. If we're modeling presence, they're going to be present. If we're modeling, being outside, and that's important. That's what's going to happen. I mean, are there going to be times when they're not? Sure. But I mean, I don't think that that's the biggest battle.
That's great.
I think connections plays a big role too. Like when you embrace what they bring forward, and it's not just kids, it's the staff too, it's the parents too. When they come up with an idea, instead of just going with your own agenda and say, no, this is where I'm going, and you actually embrace what they're bringing for you to consider, and you give them a voice, I think then they just feel heard, and they just, you acknowledge their presence, and then they're not going to shy away from that. They're going to want to be in the spotlight too, and share it with you, and work with you, and be there with you. And, going back to presence again, if you're really authentic to who you are, and you're really genuine about you wanting their involvement and engagement, then that doesn't lie, and people then contribute and work with you. And that's how we learn from each other and build with each other's strengths. And that's how we just keep having fun every day in what we do.
Great point, Christine.
I think that common thread is connection. Kids crave connection. And so I don't see it as much of a battle. It's just they want attention. They want someone to talk to. And so I think when we can engage them in lessons and storytelling, and have them be a part of learning, they are here, like they are fully here. And I have a big bowl of rocks in my room, fossils and rocks and all kinds of things. And the kids love to just touch those and hold them and talk about them. And I feel like that really gets them present too. Like it's just very grounding, I think, to hold a rock. So anyway, yeah, it's connection.
Jen, that is a great point. So our youngest just turned 13 last weekend. And so you figure he's got 9 older siblings, all on games and everything else. He has 6 brothers, well, 5 brothers, including him. And I have to stop myself sometimes. Like today was a very busy day and I had, conferences and meetings and also all sorts of stuff. And he'll come in and he'll ask me to do something. Like, do you want to jump on the trampoline or go out? And I'm like, but I'm really busy. And I have to keep stopping and saying, he's not going to keep asking me to do this and then just do it. Or if he's just sitting without his device or, or whatever, and having conversations and making time to do that and not, again, modeling it and like missing that, because you're right. They want that and they're waiting for us to do those things and stay connected.
And they're so generous. They keep, inviting us back over and over, no matter how many times we say no. But like you said, Christina, they're not always going to be asking. They're not always going to be there. And so again, if we just embrace, give it a try, you don't have to be perfect at it. You don't have to say yes all the time. Obviously we'll be busy sometime, but just embrace it, give it a try a little bit. And then I find that you always end up on the winning side of things that way.
Glad that was a thought-provoking statement that I made. That was amazing. That was wonderful. So a couple of things that I wrote down here. First of all, Christina, I love the fact that you talked about, there's a lot of negative, there's a negative narrative around social media and other ways that technology is not helping. And you really went right back to, well, there's a tremendous amount of ways that technology is helping, which is great. And then y'all going to the fact that, well, we can get them to do these other things if we just choose to. If we want them to go outside, if we want them to do sports, whatever it is, we can just choose to. And as going back to what it was in the beginning, y'all take care of yourself first. And if you take care of yourself, you now have the energy and the wherewithal to be able to have them do those things. So you can really control the direction as much as possible. Obviously, if they go home and they just jam themselves onto Instagram the entire time, but you're setting an example for the majority of their day that they're awake, which is great. And then what I really loved there was vulnerability. And the reason why I love it so much is this: vulnerability makes a tremendous amount of people uncomfortable, in my opinion. It not only makes it uncomfortable at first because people can create this judgment. If somebody in your life, your mother or your father, isn't very vulnerable, it's more of a facade type relationship. Then when somebody is, it can seem dramatic. It can seem as if they're attention seeking. There's a lot of the things that I've thought of as I've decided to become more extremely vulnerable in my life. And I keep hearing back from people that it makes them feel very uncomfortable at first, then they digest it, and then they connect with me. And the only way to connect with somebody, in my humble opinion, is to be vulnerable. Everything else is BS. That is my very strong opinion, is if you really want to connect, you're going to have to be raw with somebody. And what y'all kept referencing there was this vulnerability. And if we can get these children and young adults to be vulnerable, and obviously adults as well, but in y'all's position, children and young adults, to be vulnerable, we can then allow them to connect. And I think y'all mentioned multiple times this yearning for connection. I just love to be around people that vibed with me. And that's something that's definitely not going to go away. And y'all are navigating them connecting. You're creating opportunity for them to connect. And I loved hearing that. It definitely hits home for me. And I think it'll hit home for many others, is setting them up for connection. And y'all are setting the example when you first said how you're working on happiness, how you reflect on happiness. You're being vulnerable about the fact that there's things that are good going in life, bad, and you're just sitting there reflecting and finding a baseline of your core gratitude, whatever it is. So I just wanted to give that synopsis there of how I digested it, because I think as we move towards, there are negative pieces of social media and other things that I deal with from a marketing standpoint, because you can create a lens. You can only release that narrative as much as possible. You could go around school and you could create this persona for yourself, and then you could back it by social pictures and social videos, etc. And as we put kids more and more together, we allow the real truth to come out, in my opinion. And so that seems like y'all are continuing to foster an environment, which is really the only thing you can control, foster an environment in which we'll create that connection. So that's what I heard, and it was very liberating for me to hear that. So I appreciate y'all sharing that. Okay, so I wanted to ask this question and see who wants to take it. when when you're sitting here, you guys have talked about happiness, you've talked about the prioritizing your reflection. How is that affecting the people around you? We talked about the students and how you're it's impacting them because you're giving them an environment in which they can go to a next level of joy in their life, and that's depending on how each one of them wants to define joy and happiness. So how is it impacting people around your faculty, the kids, the parents? How is it impacting them? And then how can you make sure that this mentality is infiltrates the rest of the education industry? So I just want to hear some opinions on that.
Well, I know for me, it kind of makes me predictable. People already know what I'm going to say in most cases and what I'm going to do. I lead by my values and through the lens of what's best in the best interest of kids and their happiness. And we live and breathe our vision and mission. So I don't feel the need to have the same conversations with people because, it's going to be the same answer no matter what happens. And so I think that provides consistency, builds that trust, allows for that vulnerability, and it takes time to get there. But it really does provide an opportunity where everybody can flourish and thrive, but it does take a long time. It also provides the butt of jokes. Like my kids, you were talking about connecting, Stephen, like I come home or I'll be at the ATM. I still call it Mac. That tells you how old I am. And the other kids will be in the car and I'll stop and talk to somebody and I'll get in and all the kids will be like, all right, are they coming to Thanksgiving dinner? Because I usually find out everybody's story, share our story, and then we become friends. And, that's just kind of how it rolls. And, but that's how I love it. And they love it. And, we bring everybody and we have a very large family because it's extended in multiple ways. And the same with my students. They know, and my staff, that when I ask them how they are, I mean it. And I'm going to keep going if I don't believe them, you sure you're okay? But at the same time, that kind of affects me as well, because there is that pressure. And then goes back to what we said before about, self-care, making sure that I have my toolkit and my support system, which we are very blessed. We have a very awesome support system there and able to do that. And then coming back to what I said very early on too, about moving forward, it's not just something that needs to move forward. It is our responsibility as educators, I believe, to set these scenarios up, to put this into practice, to provide the opportunity, the action, the options and the access to happiness agency so that kids can build this toolkit. They need to know how much water they drink each day. How does that affect how they sleep, their productivity, their anxiety? So they don't have to figure this out afterwards. That's my humble opinion.
Right. Christine, Jen, any feedback there?
Jen, you can go ahead.
I was waiting for you to jump in, so I'm holding back.
I'm letting you go this time.
Okay. So I think with kids, with us, and keeping happiness, I feel like the first step sometimes is choosing to be happy and finding the joy in every day. And when you're happy, it really is contagious and it attracts other people. People want to be around you. I mean, if you think about animals know who's happy and they sense it and they want to be around you. And I think it's the same with kids. When you walk in your room and you go to sit on the carpet and all the kids come run over and sit by you, there's a whole bunch of happiness there. And so I think that's huge, and helping kids understand that too, with making friends. How can you choose happiness? How do you do that? What does that look like? And how do you use that to help you make friends? And one thing I've talked with kids about is, if you're feeling in a rut, you're just kind of feeling down, one of the best ways to take you out of that is to do something nice for somebody else. I mean, people call it filling someone's bucket or something, but it really does. I mean, more than just talking about it, if I go do something nice for someone else, I feel better and so does that person. And all of a sudden, you just shared happiness for both of you by doing something for that other person. So lots of ways I think that we can spread happiness.
I think it starts with honesty as well, to be true, to be sincere, and just acknowledging when we are not at our best and not pretending. I think sometimes as an adult, and especially sometimes in the positions that we're in, we just want to keep face. But I think we have to be real, and we have to be able to acknowledge that we're not at our best. And I think like Christina was saying, that's maybe one of the best way to model what we do and what strategies we use then to keep moving forward. And it works well with kids, it works well with parents. I think sometimes taking some time, like we're in a society where speed often, like we want to have a quick reply, we want to be the first one to respond, when in fact, really, if we just take a step back and take the time to reflect on it, to let it sit for a little bit, make sure we understand the other person's perspective, what's coming at us right now, and reflecting on that before we actually come up with a response or a reaction. I think we forget to give ourselves the chance to slow down and to truly take the time to respond. We want to be the first one to do that. And I think it all goes back to relationship building, relationship being there for others, being there for ourselves as well too, and recognizing when it's time to take a pause or yeah.
You know what, Christine, that also makes me think that was really, really important to say, because one thing that, and we're all in different points of our evolution, you know, and Stephen shared part of his journey. And I'm at the point where sometimes I have to tap out and say, I'm not the right person to be having this conversation with you, or especially with mental health first aid or otherwise, saying, I don't have the capacity right now to help, and know that even before, maybe not to that person, and have the humility to be able to step aside and let somebody else take over. And that's huge in being able to do that and accept that, especially, you know, we're all type A personalities at some level. And it really is showing that we really care about that person and care about ourselves. And I'm just getting to that point.
I find with students, especially when they come in my office and we have to discuss our problem solve together, when I actually tell them, I don't have the answer right here. I'm not sure how I would have reacted if I had been in their shoes. So let's just think about it. Let's brainstorm. Let's see, you know, maybe look at some different scenarios, and, you know, just modeling that for them, that, you know, we don't have all of the answers, that, you know, we're all learning through this. And sometimes we will have to come back on what we said previously and, you know, make a correction. And that's okay, because, you know, that's what we're in this business for. It's to learn. And as we evolve in our job as individuals, as just as a group, as a team as well, I think it's important for us to just keep modeling that, and sometimes to just be honest with ourselves and just say, you know what, I just don't know right now. So I'm going to wait and see and think about it.
Well, I got some really good notes here. So there's some really wonderful things I want to highlight there. So first of all, the building of a mental toolkit. I have a position on building a mental toolkit, and I thought that Christina, when you mentioned toolkit, I think you were the first one to reference it. That's everybody can build their own mental toolkit. However, it is that brings you joy. I think that's probably some of the best advice, with the baseline of gratitude, humility, being present. All of those are foundational pieces. But something that I believe it needs to be highlighted is all those foundational pieces still need to be put into place, and also need to have upkeep. I think the mental toolkit makes sure that the foundation, when it cracks, it gets repaired. When something messed up happens, an earthquake happens, whatever it is, it stays repaired. And for me, I have a nucleus. I have specific people. As someone that's on the disorder spectrum, I have a hard time weighing my thoughts. I bring extremely critical people that are very rational, and I bring them in and I go, verbal process, verbal process, verbal process. They write it down, they pause. The majority of the time I get to my own answer, because that's how, when you can't weigh your thoughts, you just spit it out. And then they're one of the tools. They're one of the tools in my toolbox. And there's a bunch of other ways, the journaling, but everybody can have their own mental toolbox, and you should have a mental toolbox. And if you don't, you should invest time into it, because even if you hit something where you set the foundation in place, it's going to erode. That's rational to think it's going to erode, and events, stress, and trauma in life are going to happen, and it could ruin that foundation. And if you built something very strong on top of that foundation, it's going to fall. And I think that was really great counsel with regards to the mental toolkit. And what it segues into is there's no absolutes. Everybody referenced all this great advice, and it's not absolute. Just because you are practicing, you talked about, I think it was, who referenced the yoga and such? Was it Okay, Jen, you referenced yoga and all these things that you're doing. Doesn't mean you don't skip days. Doesn't mean you don't have you end up having weeks where you skipped it. You didn't do these things. And when you have great examples such as y'all, it seems as if it's absolute. They're always doing it. And that's BS. It's not true at all. And that's what makes the advice being one thing, but then the vulnerability of, yeah, I'm not 100% efficient with this. And then sharing that, as I'm sure you guys do with your students and with your family. And so there's this mental toolkit that you have to make sure that when you're vulnerable with these misses, because it's not absolute, you can make this plan and it's not absolute. And so I think that was another thing that kind of was something that revealed itself from that. And then the sharing something nice. God, every time I had a little bit of a tough morning today, I'm thinking about my buddy. We're going to go hit some range balls later. And as much as I'm excited to hit some golf balls later, I'm more excited to give him a lesson. I'm more excited. And I don't even like teaching, but I know he's going to be stoked when I give him that lesson. You talk about the simplest little thing. I'm just going to surprise him with giving that lesson. Totally going to change my day. And you are setting examples with that, with regards to giving kids that and your family. Just do something nice whenever it's a tough day. So I heard all those things, the mental toolkit, sharing nice things. And then it reminded me that there's no absolutes. We can all set this great example. We're all going to screw up. And that's what makes us superhuman. And I think that when we go to like the question of how can this mentality be shared? I think that's exactly what y'all said is let's set this plan. Let's execute it to our highest ability. But I think the piece there is like, we have to also maintain it and bring people around us to make sure that we maintain it, especially as type A personalities, when it's polarized, that we're doing so many things right. And it's almost, and I'd love to hear that from y'all is, when you're seen as doing almost like superhuman to so many, to teachers, to other faculty, to these kids, that you do so much right. How do you handle that narrative that again, I don't know how much y'all think about that, but it's like you seem almost like superhuman at times. How do y'all handle that?
Well, I just set the stage right from the beginning. I purposely make mistakes. No, I don't. I just make mistakes all the time. Right. I fumble. I mess up my words. I had a traumatic brain injury 6 years ago, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because I say the wrong name, I say the wrong whatever, and then I'm like, whoops. I mean, really, honestly, that was like awesome. And then just one other thing I want to mention before I forget, because I will, Find Your Anchor, write that down. It's a really awesome program about a mental health toolkit, but it's writing down the anchors to keep you happy. It's completely free. The founder is just amazing story.
Jen, you're too quiet. Feed us with your knowledge. So I know for sure. One of the things I wanted to mention is or what I wanted to ask is, again, you're in this position in which normally probably doesn't get seen as a lot of vulnerability, but you've shared a lot of vulnerability in some of your feedback and such. So if you want to share this mentality that you have with others in this position that you have, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Be real, show up authentically. I don't ever pretend. I don't know. And I think the other thing is this whole like misconception that when you're in leadership, there's this barrier between, like there's this invisible wall, like I'm the leader and you are going to do what I say, this kind of thing. And even with kids, even teachers in the classroom, I'm the authority, I'm teaching and you guys listen to me, you must raise your hand, that kind of thing. I think letting that down a little bit. So, when I talk to teachers or kids, I have 2 chairs in my room. So I'm at my desk in my office now, but across from me, I have 2 chairs on a little carpet. And if somebody wants to talk to about something, a delicate matter or whatever, I'll go and sit in the chair next to them. And I feel like that helps to take down that barrier. We're 2 people. Just because I'm the leader of this school doesn't mean that I know more, that I'm better or anything like that. I'm here to listen to you and we're going to work through this together. And I think with teachers, that's so important to build relationships and just be real. If I'm running late one morning, hey guys, I was totally running late. That's real life. That happens. I'm a mom too, This morning we had 4 inches of snow in Ohio in April. And so all the trees have leaves. And so all the snow came down. We had a tree fall in my front yard and it covered up the driveway. So at 6:45, I'm waking up my husband, I'm like, can you go get the chainsaw and cut down a tree so I can get to work? I mean, how does that even happen? So like when I got to work today, I do my announcements on the same screen too. And so I just told kids, I'm like, you guys, you're not going to believe what happened this morning. A tree fell down in my yard. So I think that whole realness, and just like, they know me, they know what I'm going to bring every day, or I don't think they knew about the tree, but that kind of thing. So I think that just authenticity piece, where we're not pretending to be somebody different because we are a leader. Make sense?
Right.
We just have to share what we have in common. Like it's might be the principal of the school, but it's not my school. I'm not the one who's making things happen here. So it's celebrating too what other people contribute. So I'm more like a facilitator, and yes, sure, I'll guide them in the direction that we might need to have, and see where else I can help them get the tools, like the strategies they're missing, or what the extras that they need. But really, we're all in this together. It's at the end of the day, if they don't buy in, you're alone. Like there's nothing happening, and this. So we have to be connected. We have to be listening. And somebody told me when they seek to understand and not to be understood. So it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about us. It's about them. And it's I find that just like we often, especially as teachers, educators, we tend to talk a lot just because that's what we do in the classroom. But when you learn to actually stop talking and listen and let them do a bit of the teaching, to me, that's happiness there. I find that's where those are the best days on the job. So when I talk less, listen more, and just let them take over.
I have more amazing notes from you guys. I'm big ball learning right now. What I loved there is Jen, same here, is all about lived experience. If you just say something about anxiety or depression or whatever it is, those simple labels are very difficult to digest. And even just the tree thing, that's a lived experience. It's an actual small event that happened, and something to disrupt your drive to work. It's a lived experience. It's something that somebody can apply and latch onto. And what I love about that, and going back to your authenticity, talking about authenticity, is, and Christine, what you said about the environment and listening, you're creating an environment by sharing some vulnerability, being authentic, and listening. You're creating an environment that allows them to do the same thing, free of thought, all these different things, and sharing lived experiences, micro events, allows people to attach to them. And I can't imagine how much effect that could have on a child who's developing. I'm doing it with adults over here. Kids terrify me because I worry about, I know how I was as a child, and I just want to set a great example for them. So I'm like sitting here like, well, I got to refine my personality so I can become a great example for them. And I just want to create an environment in which allows them to prosper. And I think that you guys mentioning, vulnerability and Joy, you mentioning, or Jen, you mentioning the lived experience. See, I'm talking about joy and happiness, so I'm going to call Jen Joy now. Mentioning the lived experience, I think that's brilliant. And one of the other things there is regardless of your position, what I heard, how I digested is, regardless of your position, asking children and your faculty and family, let's just make the most rational decision. I don't care who it came from. I have experiences in my life, and I might know something maybe that you don't, but let's just share it. And let's all agree if it's the most rational or not. And instead of it just looking at like from a hierarchy standpoint, just like what's the most rational. And I think another thing that as high level educators, what I liked there is y'all can continue to share this vulnerability. This quote hit me, and I typed it in to make sure I said it right. Good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from making bad decisions. Mm-hmm. And for y'all to get to where you are, it seems as this, they've known this the whole time, yada, yada. And y'all have made tons of bad decisions to get here. And that's the only way you get to there. And I'm sure you promote that to the kids, because it's like, wow, let me tell you, I think, Christina, when you mentioned about your traumatic brain injury, it just gave you another vehicle to not necessarily make the mistakes, but to just wear the mistakes and allow other people to connect to you because you're so human. So a lot of notes there. I really enjoyed hearing that from y'all. So in wrapping up here, I want to kind of take a final note of, feedback that you'd like to, or advice you'd like to, one piece of advice that each of you would like to give others that watch this. I learned so much myself just from hearing y'all, from slowing things down to allowing yourself to actually do more. Whereas we speed up, and you guys are getting back to your core, to the mental toolkit, vulnerability, lived experiences. There's so much good stuff there. So if you had to give one piece of advice based on focusing on happiness and living a happy life, I'm gonna roll the dice here on which person's gonna go first. So let me see which person wins. Here we go.
You
The
have an
first
actual
person-
dice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Christine goes first. Pressure's on. You see that face right there? She just went like this. Come on.
Oh, so okay, well,
Whatever comes to mind, Christine. Whatever comes to mind, you just go with it.
I would just say, like, to me, and I'm talking to myself as well, is to me is to slow down. Yes, I have my core, I have my reasons, but I'm a type A personality, so I'll keep pushing myself, and I'll be pushing myself more than anybody else can push myself, which is to a tremendous point at like most of the time. So it's really, to be happy, to realize what you have to do to be happy is to slow down, to celebrate the mistakes. There's no learning when there's no mistakes. And so it's as long as you're trying hard, you're doing your best, and that's the best you can do. So I think the pandemic has taught me that perfection is not real. It's not a thing. So, but it's what you do trying to better yourself that matters. So just like I tell my teachers, my students, the answer is not really what matters. It's everything that happens between now and then. So it's the journey that you go on and it doesn't have to be about the curriculum. It's about what's happening here, what's happening there. And it's at the end of it all, what you're going to celebrate is the growth in your head, sure, in your knowledge, but also in your heart and who you are. So
You didn't want to go first. All right, Christina or Jen, either one of you, whoever wants to go.
oh, sure. And now you don't roll it.
Look at you dropped the knowledge bomb to start it off. I mean, you set the table. I'd slow down. I'm Mr. Manic over here. I'm already.
I know, Jen, you want to do rock, paper, scissors?
1, 2, 3, shoot. All right.
Yep.
So Jen won. Christina has to go first.
All right. So I think my advice is you're enough. Period.
Perfect.
Well said. Well said. All right. 2 knowledge bombs in a row. Jen, what you got? Hey, it's not a very, it's not a very high ladder to climb here.
Okay. So I want everyone to lean in, because you know how sometimes we like need a sign for something, like, oh, there's a sign. Like, oh, I need to do this. So I want you to listen for that sign, for whatever it is that's going to light up your life, to bring you joy. What is that thing that's going to fill you up? And I want you, like, this is your sign. So you don't have to wait. Like, you don't even have to keep looking. Like, this is your sign. What is that thing that you're like, oh, I want to do that. Do that.
That's
Do
awesome.
it. Just do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I very much appreciate everybody sharing. I think people will get a tremendous amount of value from the advice and the vulnerability you all shared today. So, and I am very appreciative of being able to listen and to moderate and to learn from all of you. So I want to thank you and everybody that listened to this. And so I appreciate your time. I will stop the recording here real quick and